a day it has been for the University of Alabama and Nick Saban on the recruiting trail. Earlier this morning, we made a video talking about number 2 running back in the nation, 5-star Kamar Wheaton, officially putting pen to paper and signing with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, when that signing happened, it became official that Alabama had the number 1 recruiting class, not only of this year, but of all time. And if you're an OG to this channel, you'll know this is something I've been talking about since August, when it was a duel between Alabama and Ohio State, but I always said whoever had the number 1 recruiting class in the nation was going to break that metric. Well, Alabama ended up breaking the metric. But not long after, that same Crimson Tide recruiting class that just made history was gifted a cherry on top, and we have got to talk about that cherry, because 4-star safety per 24/7 composite, per 24/7's own ranking, 5-star safety Terrion Arnold commits to the Crimson Tide recruiting class, and we've got to talk about why this is so important. But before we do, as always, I want to hear from y'all. How excited are you for Terrion Arnold to be committing to the University of Alabama, and do you think he can find playing time next year in the rotation? Give me a Y for yes and an N for no, and let me know why down below. Y'all, if you're already here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I do constant college football content, whether it be player analysis, talk videos like this, and with the NFL draft coming up, you're not going to want to miss any of that content. We're on our push to 2,000 subscribers, so be sure to drop a like, comment down below, and subscribe and hit the bell notification. But with all that being said, let's talk about why this signing is so important. Terrion Arnold became an integral part of this Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting class early in the process. For those of you that remember, back in December, the Crimson Tide identified 2 defensive backs that they wanted to go after JaQuincy McKinstry signed. That was Terrion Arnold and Sage Ryan. Sage Ryan decided to go to LSU, and look, more power to him. Hopefully he has the best career he possibly can over there, because the kid is uber talented. But Alabama's not losing any sleep over the guy they got. Terrion Arnold is comped to Xavier McKinney per 24/7 Sports. And if you really watch his film, I think they give a spot-on analysis of him. I think that he plays the ball incredibly well. He's incredibly physical. He really does check every box. And I agree more with the 24/7 Sports independent rating that he is a 5-star safety than I do with the composite putting him at the 50th best player in the nation, because I don't think there are 50 football players better than Terrion Arnold in the nation. There's a lot of good talent out there, but Terrion Arnold is absolutely amongst one of the best. Now, this is something that became ever more important when Sage Ryan, like I said, did commit to LSU. The Crimson Tide wanted to shore up that DB backfield, specifically at safety. The Tide have pulled in some awesome cornerbacks. In number 2, Juco Kyrie Jackson, who has unbelievable length. He's a name to watch out for, y'all. We talked about earlier on last week about which names we could watch out for being a year 1 contributor to Alabama. Watch the name Kyrie Jackson, because he's got unreal rangy length. And when you add in a Kyrie Jackson, when you add in a JaQuincy McKinstry, and then you're able to top it all off with Terrion Arnold, this Alabama Crimson Tide not only recruiting class, but program for the foreseeable future is in mint condition. And I want to talk a little bit about why. The Alabama defense over the past 2 years hasn't been the vaunted defense we've all known and loved, but that's okay, because 1, it hasn't needed to be. And 2, it hasn't needed to be because college football has inevitably changed. While there will always be great defensive teams and always room for great defensive play, the name of the game is offense now. And like Nick Saban said, whether we want to admit it or not, we have to get on board that great defense doesn't beat great offense anymore. There's a reason why you saw Alabama, LSU completely obliterate teams on offense. Now, that being said, you cannot be one-sided, something that OU discovered. OU perennially has had amazing offenses in the college football playoff era, but hasn't been able to get the job done ultimately like they should and want to because of the lack of defense, something that Grinch has them improving upon massively. But the reason why I think Alabama is so good for the foreseeable future and will actually be better defensively than they've been the past 2 years is I want to start with the front 7, already incredibly deep. When you add in 5-star Damon Payne into the rotation on an already endless list of guys with LeBron Ray and Chris Allen coming back, not to mention freshman superstar Will Anderson Jr., Also, OGs to the channel, you'll know I called Will Anderson Jr. way back in his first game. Right after the Missouri game, I uploaded a video talking about how Will Anderson Jr. was going to be a massive problem for college football. Fast forward to the end of the year, he's the sack leader in the SEC and just cannot be stopped. And you think he was good last year, just wait till next year. You have that up front, and yes, Alabama has to replace Dylan Moses, but Christian Harris was really, really good in his time this year, and I believe in the depth behind Christian Harris to be able to replace Dylan Moses. Now, they won't be a Dylan Moses with that freakish athleticism, but they don't have to be. And specifically now to the part that pertains to Terrion Arnold, the secondary. You know, before this year happened, when I was just looking on paper, I thought that this year was incredibly important for Alabama to really solidify that secondary. Patrick Surtain was going into the NFL. You didn't know the status of Daniel Wright, but you knew that Pat Surtain was going to go because he was going to get a first-round grade, and you had to assume Daniel Wright was going to go as well, which would have left the Alabama Crimson Tide secondary very young and without a real baller. Until Malachi Moore and Brian Branch insert themselves into the equation. Now that Alabama Crimson Tide secondary is as talented as I can remember. I'm not saying they're going to be the best Alabama Crimson Tide secondary or the second or third. What I'm saying is from a talent standpoint, I'm just as excited about this Alabama Crimson Tide secondary as any I've ever been or seen because of the additions of a JaQuincy McKinstry, a Kyrie Jackson, now a Terrion Arnold to play alongside a Jordan Battle, a Malachi Moore, a Brian Branch, a Josh Jobe. You guys get what I'm saying. The talent depth here in this Alabama secondary is absolutely freaky, and we haven't spent 1 second of this video talking about what Alabama pulled on the offensive side of the football. The best 2 tackles in the nation are rolling with the Tide. Not only the best 2 tackles in the nation, Alabama pulled 3 of the top 10 players in the nation and 2 of the top 5 tackles in the nation. 2 of the top 5 players in the nation were tackles, and Alabama got them. Bryce Young looks to have a hyper-successful season next year, and they're doing this right, with an incredible running back core, with an incredible offensive line, great tight end play, and they are reloading something heavy on the wide receiver room. But I'm telling y'all, look for massive improvements in this defense because this secondary is just as talented as any I can remember. Once again, I'm not saying they're going to be the best, but this secondary on paper is incredibly talented. I can't wait to hear from y'all. Comment down below letting me know first off what you think of this secondary, and second off what you think about the signing of Terrion Arnold. That's it. See ya.